Welcome back to Carneades.org. Today we're going to be looking at the fall of the American Republic. So, America has ceased to be a republic. This is always a hard line to draw, as the fall of any republic is necessarily gradual, but this is at least the beginning of the end. The evidence has been mounting for years, but the last few months have brought it into stark relief. In this video, we're going to look at what a republic is, the argument for why the United States of America is no longer a republic, and what you can do about it. So, I do not issue this warning lightly. I've been either in school or in public service since I was 5 years old. I've served under presidents of both parties and worked directly with Senate-confirmed political appointees from both parties, including during the first Trump administration. I'm currently a federal employee. I give this as the perspective of someone inside the system who is deeply concerned that it is being broken in ways that can never be fixed. The views of this video are my own and do not reflect the official position of the U.S. government or any department or agency. I'm sure this video will lose me subscribers. It's going to be an intense one. It could even lose me my job. But things have gotten bad enough that I must speak out. So, in the philosophical sense, there are two main criteria for a place being a republic: civic participation and the balance of powers. In a republic, the citizens take an active role in the maintenance of their society. People should care about the well-being of their society and work towards its preservation, not merely their own self-interest. Additionally, there should be balance between the powers of the state. No one branch should have too much control or power. This prevents any one individual from usurping the laws and the justice system of the land because there are others in power who can check them. Check out my video on what is republicanism for more information. So, there are many examples of republics failing throughout history. One of the most famous is the fall of the Roman Republic, which culminated in the power of the Roman Senate being usurped by Caesar Augustus. There are many complex factors that led to this moment: increases in inequality following the Second Punic Wars, breakdown of political norms, political violence, the founding governance structure no longer supporting much larger country, lack of social mobility that came from reduced conquest opportunities, and many more that we're not going to get into here. We're not going to be focused on the history, we're focusing on the philosophical concepts of what is a republic. It's important to note, though, that some of these characteristics do mirror our current moment: rising inequality, breakdown of political norms, decreasing social mobility, etc. Others do not, at least not yet. One might argue that the death of the Republic started long before Augustus and continued on afterwards. As noted, republics fall slowly, and sometimes this fall is a bumpy path with ups and downs. Of course, in popular culture, the fall of the Galactic Republic in Star Wars is another example of the checks and balances of a republic willingly giving up their power to a dictator, though arguably this fall happens much faster in fiction than it does in the real world. But in both cases, the result was the same: a society with broad participation and structural checks and balances was eliminated in favor of a dictatorship. So, a lot of ink has been spilled on the destruction of the balance of power, and we will get there. But first, we should talk about civic participation, as this has been much less discussed, but it is just as, if not more, important for a place to be a republic. In a republic, public service is lionized and glorified. Citizens are encouraged to work to better their own communities, to volunteer for civic organizations, to value the good of the country over their own, to take an active part in their republic. America has failed in this, with the Trump administration accelerating trends that were already tearing at the fabrics of our republic. Here are 4 key ways that we can see this happening: the vilification of public servants, the abandonment of charity, the decline of participation in civic organizations, and the glorification of personal greed over collective good. Let's take a look at each in turn. So, a republic should venerate public service, not vilify it. In a republic, citizens are encouraged to take an active role in their government. Public servants are those who put the good of the nation, the good of the community, the good of their neighbors over their own good. Many give up far greater earning potential in the private sector because they believe in the importance of helping others. In a true republic, public servants are celebrated. However, for years, the Republican Party has done everything they can to cast public servants as villains, constantly asking us to do more with less, calling us lazy, destroying public sector unions and workers' rights, cutting pay and benefits for public servants in order to lower taxes on the rich, defunding initiatives, then criticizing those same initiatives for failing to deliver services, and using that failure as evidence that those initiatives should be cut further, all while replacing public servants with privatized alternatives owned by their friends and family, which deliver worse services at higher prices. Trump has denigrated military veterans, calling those who died in the service of our country suckers and losers. The second Trump administration has only exaggerated these trends. Russell Voigt, Trump's head of the Office of Management and Budget, has said he wants federal workers to be traumatically affected, to not want to go to work. Elon Musk has illegally fired tens of thousands of public servants, focusing on those agencies which regulated or investigated his own companies. This has nothing to do with efficiency. In fact, it has cost much more money because the government is breaking laws and then having to defend itself in court, losing and then being forced to pay the money with extra fees anyway. The federal government spent $154 billion more in the first quarter of 2025 than it did in the same quarter of 2024. Most of it wasted on Trump's nonsense. My agency has proposed hundreds of thousands of dollars in savings to our DOJ representatives, but been ignored because their goal is not actually saving money. It is the intimidation and destruction of anyone that wants to serve their country. To make this clear, Musk said he would cut $2 trillion from the budget. He's only cut $150 billion and has provided no evidence for $100 billion of that. These cuts have cost him $138 billion to make, which is almost the full amount that he cut. Now, this is hard to put into context because these numbers are so large. So let's try a smaller order of magnitude. This would be like someone bragging that they make $200,000 a year, when actually they only make $15,000 a year. Not only that, they're running a business, and the $15,000 is their gross income before any of their expenses. They're in fact taking in $15,000, but then spending $13,800 to cover their expenses, meaning they only net $1,200. In other words, they're only netting $100 a month. Would you trust someone that bragged that they make $200,000 when they actually only take home $100 a month? This has nothing to do with saving money for the taxpayers. Why is the denigration of public service a bad thing? Why should we prefer a republic to a dictatorship? A republic needs people to be actively engaged in the government because those people make their government better. When people care about the government, when people care about providing public services, those public services are better. It makes the government not merely democratically for the people, but in the sense of a republic by the people as well. If no one wants to inspect your food for botulism, to care for your veterans in VA hospitals, to clean your water of toxins, to ensure your planes don't crash into each other, to repair the potholes on your highways, to teach your children, and to run into your buildings that are on fire, then those things won't get done, and people will die preventable deaths. We are already losing the moral values of caring for each other, the principle that we can do so much more together than we can alone. Not to mention, it is the civil servants whose job it is to ensure that the administration is following the law, who have been summarily fired over and over again just for doing their jobs. Why do you think the Jedi were the first who Palpatine killed upon assuming power? Another key signifier of the loss of our republic is the abandonment of charity by this administration. We already discussed in our video on Ordo Amoris the complete abdication of moral authority by the administration when it comes to international charity. Now, however, even domestic charity is being targeted, with AmeriCorps, the federal government's agency for public and community service, experiencing massive cuts at the hands of Elon Musk, with thousands of young volunteers working to serve their country being dismissed. They've targeted NPR, they've targeted PBS, they've targeted anything that's trying to do things in the public good, allowing people to volunteer and support their communities, their local communities. Anyone that tries to put others over themselves, who tries to do good in a world at the expense of their own benefit, is being harassed, targeted, and eliminated. Trump must crush those who are selfless, because if everyone is selfish, he is off the hook for his greed. Funds for disaster relief have been cut. The administration has cut Social Security offices around the country, and Republicans have proposed cuts to Medicare, health insurance for the most vulnerable in society, to pay for tax cuts for the wealthiest Americans. This is the opposite of what a republic should be doing. Republics have an active citizenry who help each other when they are in need, who value the benefit of the community over their own benefit. The identity of the nation is built on that mutual support, the idea that we are stronger together. In a republic, everyone should give to help those impacted by hardship, by natural disaster, and by disease. The Trump administration is cutting off anyone who holds the idea of the public good over the personal good, trying to quash the values of public service in favor of the values of individual greed. This is not about balancing the budget. This is an intentional remaking of society to punish and destroy anyone that cares for their neighbor, anyone who is driven by compassion instead of greed, anyone who puts others before themselves. This administration is trying to rationalize their own avarice, their own greed, by wiping out careers for anyone who chooses to serve their country instead of serving themselves. There's another trend that heralds the end of the American Republic, the decline of civic participation. This has been in decline for years, with membership in civic organizations like churches and unions dropping substantially. The rate of Americans volunteering fell from 30% in 2019 to 23% in 2023. But this is not just a recent trend. In the last several decades, participation in organizations like the PTA, the Red Cross, or the Elks Club have declined by between 25 and 50%. Participation in political parties, rallies, protests, school board meetings has also declined between 35 and 55% since the 1970s. It is unclear if this is the cause of our current political climate or an effect of it. Likely, it's a little of both. As fewer people participate in civil society, they get less connected from politics. They feel more disenfranchised. They feel like they have less ability to impact their government. They feel like their government is less by them. They don't appreciate the need for a government system when they don't actively participate in it. They take it for granted. They don't feel like they can affect real change when they don't engage with their local government. This is a self-fulfilling prophecy. The more you don't engage, the less autonomy you feel over the system, the more likely you are to want to break the system, which makes fewer people engage because the system is already broken, etc., further deepening the cycle. If the only people who participate in the system are those who are gaining some personal benefit from it, then the system will necessarily become corrupt. We need people who care about making the system better, not simply breaking it or benefiting themselves, to be active participants in it. This will drive people away from it because they dismiss it as a corrupt system that they do not want to participate in instead of something they can reform. While part of a longer trend, it should also be made clear that the Trump administration is making this worse, defunding religious groups who give to charity, targeting churches whose doctrine they disagree with. You can tell it's bad when I'm defending churches, which, for all their faults, do provide people with a place for community and do provide charity. Illegally trying to destroy unions that represent hundreds of thousands of workers, unconstitutionally obliterating the agencies that fund libraries, museums, science centers, art galleries, and more. Places that people come together and experience civil society within their own communities. These places where Americans come together, union halls, churches, libraries, are being killed by Trump, who's illegally stripping their funding without a mandate from Congress. The impacts may not have filtered down to your local community yet, but they will. Opportunities for civic participation are being stolen from us left and right. The very things that we could use to strengthen our republic are being destroyed. This brings us to the final indicator of the death of civic participation in America, the glorification of personal greed over communal support. The rise of this viewpoint among many, though not all in the U.S., can be seen in a number of ways. The Republican desire to cut taxes on the wealthy while cutting social programs that support the poor. The unwillingness of many during the pandemic to endure the slight discomfort of wearing a mask in order to save the lives of others prior to the vaccine. The focus on material indicators of success at the expense of all others. The idea that the only thing that your value is reliant on is how much money you make, the kinds of things that you have, not how you spend your time, the organizations you work with, the good that you do. The president championing cheating on his taxes while denigrating the IRS workers who work to collect those taxes and fund all of the programs that we rely on for our society. The more Americans value their own personal greed over the good of the country, the weaker the country will be. We have lost sight of our true motto of our country, e pluribus unum, out of many, one. This ideology is pernicious, and it should be clear how it is unraveling the other components of a strong republic. If you think that greed is good and helping others is bad, of course you would think that the civil servants who are taking your money to work for the greater good are evil. If you think greed is good, of course you would disavow charity and only support programs that benefit you personally. If you think that your own personal wealth is the only metric to judge your worth as a human by, of course you would refuse to do volunteer work or support organizations that provide you with no material benefit back. In such a world, the only people who go to work for these organizations will be those that seek to profit off of them. This idea can be traced back to the field of economics and the idea that we should be maximizing utility as measured by willingness to pay. There's a whole separate argument about this. Check out our book, Are All Lives Equal, for more on how economists have ruined everything. So, this idea is also seductive. It is nice to think that you are doing a good and rational thing by maximizing your own personal utility. It is nice to be able to dismiss that any that support the public good are corrupt, or any that give their time freely in volunteer work are being irrational. This is not to say that many of these institutions are at risk of being corrupt, but that is exactly because people are participating in them not for the sake of the common good, but for personal benefit. We need these institutions, but we must reform them. We need people to go into them not with the idea idea of saying how much money can this make me, but what good can I do here? The desire to throw out everything that doesn't directly benefit us is stronger when the institutions that should benefit others are failing. But in fact, this is a sign that you should be more involved with them, not less. They will not get better without your help. Now, beyond this decline in support for civic participation, the loss of our republic can be seen in the destruction of the separation of powers. This has been written about widely in a lot of other fora, so we're not only going to just touch on it briefly here. The executive has stolen the power of the purse from Congress by illegally dismantling agencies and departments and stealing the money that has already been appropriated for them. The federal government is ignoring and challenging the state's right to set education curriculum and protect the environment. The executive has also ignored the judicial branch sending residents of America to prison in El Salvador without a trial for wearing a Bulls jersey, then refusing to return them despite court orders requiring it. This practice is deeply concerning. The judicial branch does not have a military to enforce its orders. If this stands, there's nothing to stop the administration from deporting citizens without trial for any reason, because you spoke out against them, because you look a certain way, because of your religion. If the courts cannot order you freed, and the administration has fired all the bureaucrats who would force them to follow the law, they have fully unchecked power. Remember, Auschwitz was in Poland, not in Germany. So, such a subject can be very depressing. It can feel like there is very little that any of us can do to save our great nation from losing our republic. And if you're outside of the United States, you may be seeing some of these trends as well. You may want to know what can you do to prevent those trends from coming to your country. There are things you can do, both on a big scale and the small. First off, to restore the balance of powers. Think about donating to and voting for candidates who oppose violations of the Constitution, regardless of party. Protest when the administration violates the law. Speak out and file lawsuits when your rights are violated, and encourage others to do the same. Do not lie down and let your rights be taken from you. Second, there are much smaller, more tangible, and in some ways more important things that you can do to restore our civic society. Join your local union, your local community center, your local library as a member, join your local science center, other civic organization as a dues-paying member. Don't just pay dues, though. Actually show up to meetings, volunteer for leadership positions, do the work at that place. We cannot build a community without people who are willing to show up and do the work, to build that community, to build back up our nation. Support the civil servants in your community, the teachers, the firefighters, the doctors, the federal workers in any way you can. We are all under assault right now, and we need your help. Show up to local government meetings, at the school board, at your town, and let your voice be heard. Run for local office. And shift your perspective, most importantly. Define your value, not in how much you make, but in how much you contribute to others, in the good you do for others. What do you think? Has America lost its republic? Has civic participation declined past the point where we can truly say we care for our fellow citizens? Has the idea of personal greed over public benefit metastasized to weaken and corrupt our civic institutions? Whew. That was a rough one. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. I'm sure there are many of you that will disagree with me. Please lay it on. I'm happy to engage in a debate. Watch this video and more here at Carneades.org, and stay skeptical, everybody.